The first noble truth of the eight in ancient Buddhism is that suffering and pain is universal. It's all over. Would you agree? And then it goes on the other eightfold paths of saying how that we can overcome it. Christianity pretty much says the same thing. When I was a young teenager, one of the first verses I was told and that I learned was a short one from Romans 3, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." Of course, I was taught it as a very fearful verse, that I had violated God and made God angry, and if I didn't accept his blood sacrifice of his son Jesus, I would burn in hell forever. But later I understood it just meant, as Paul was trying to say, that we all have fallen short of living in God's joy and glory and peace. But we are overtaken in this life of misery and of suffering and anger that goes with it. In fact, one of the books of the New Testament, that early church writing in Hebrews, it says if any of us are not disciplined by God, some translations undergo suffering in order to awaken, as any good parent has to allow its children to do. If we don't experience that, then we're really illegitimate and don't really understand what it means to live as a child of God. So suffering is everywhere, and we're a part of it. And to be honest, we understand that it's a part of every day that we live in our experience. It's a world of duality, of pain, of ease, of light and cold, as the Bhagavad Gita says. We just have to learn to deal with them, to endure them, and to live above them. So what are the consequences of living in this world of pain and suffering? Well, anger, depression, hatred, as we express it, either toward ourselves, which is really what people define depression as being, or toward others in outward acts of violence toward people and obstacles which threaten, we believe, our peace. In fact, the root of the word suffer really means that which comes to the surface from within. You can see it in the word suffer. Anger is really from the root of the word meaning angst, of trouble. And so it just bursts out. And so if we take it out on ourselves, we go inward, it's called depression. But if we lash out at others, it's called that kind of outward anger, of hatred. Now, we use that many times as a power. Since we all are in a sense of anxious and suffering and troubles, then we like to call ourselves victims. And sometimes we have little pity parties. And sometimes we compare that our sense of being victimized is even worse than others, or worse than yours. I really love my father. He just died a few weeks ago. But when I was a little boy, my brothers and I, and those who worked with him, often would be frightened because when we had a long day of work, he often would stop and grab his chest and say, "Oh, my heart is just pounding and pounding. I don't know how much longer it can go on." Well, as a young teenager, we thought he was going to die right there in front of us, and we were working him to death, and so we had to work harder. Well, of course, my father went on and lived to be 91 and retired at 53, and he was a pretty healthy man for most of his life. But we all have that tendency to use our victimization to manipulate others. I knew a woman in Niagara Falls years ago who had a husband with MS, and he was confined to a wheelchair, and she gave up her good job and so much of her life just to care for him. And one day she wanted to go to Kleinhans to work as a volunteer. Well, she got a free concert and he didn't want her to go. He said, "Please stay, I'm not feeling well." And she said, "You know, honey, I love to do this." And he said, "Oh," he says, "if you go, I will wheel myself over to the gorge at Niagara Falls and I will push myself right in." Well, she just went out and she turned before him before she left and she said, "Well, honey, when I get back, if you have not pushed yourself over into the gorge, I will do it myself." And she shut the door and went to the concert. Well, when she got home, she opened the door and there he sat with a nice smile and he said, "Honey, did you have a good time?" See, we all can use that victimization, that sense of my suffering is worse than yours, to manipulate people. So what's the antidote? What's the cure? It goes back to the identity problem. Who are we? Are we these bodies, or is there something deeper? And my answer, and the answer to the essence of religions for centuries is, I'm not my body. That's just a temporary vessel, temple, means of communication that I'm in for a few years. What I really am is spirit, connected with God who is spirit. So one of my mantras that I like to say is, almost daily, I'm not my body, I am free, for I am exactly as God created me. And that's the word that Jesus came. He came to tell the people that it's all in your mind, and you're thinking that it's outside, it's in bodies, other bodies, it's in wealth, it's in food, it's in travels, it's entertainments, but the kingdom, the presence, the reign is within you. Just think about it. In the ancient Hindu scriptures, there's a line that says, mental problems and troubles cause you to think mentally, which is another way of saying, who am I? Find that out and you will find peace, but it's not in form. It's not changeable. The part that we are is that Christos, that Christ, which is the same today as it was yesterday and will be forevermore. That's our hope. That's our peace. And if we can keep coming back to that, no matter where we live, whatever the climate, whatever goes on around us, whatever problem we're having with aging, youth, with neighborhoods, neighbors, state, taxes, poverty, rich, they just pale because they're all temporal and the spirit is eternal. Now, Jesus in the stories is an example of that. He's so identified with his Christ self, his God self, that it says in 1 Peter that even when he was abused, he did not return abuse, but love and kind and tenderness. That's the way he died. Now, people like Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., they saw the power in that when we act innocently and forcefully without violence, but in peace, it's very powerful in the effect it has on people around us socially, also the same with people personally around us. If we could stay calm and peaceful and loving, even in a time of great criticism and even threats, even death, then that's a test of our identification. In the East, there's this old story of a great teacher who had a little teaching hut outside of a village. Hundreds came over the years to visit and hear him talk and give them little advice on how to stay in touch with their identity, that Atman, that Christ within. But one day, a teenage girl, 16-year-old, told her parents she was pregnant and that he was the father. Well, her parents told it all over the community. He was a disgrace. And so no longer did anybody come. The baby was born and the parents took it and left it right on his doorstep for him to raise. And so he got an old lady from the community and they did that the best they could. 6 months went by and the daughter could take it no more. She told her parents that he was not the father, the neighbor boy was. And they were so embarrassed. They went back and they apologized and said, we're so sorry, we'll take the child. And so the teacher just simply said, that's okay, I enjoyed the child, God be with you. And that's all he said. And pretty soon the people started coming back again. There was a free man. There was a man with peace. There was a man who saw something beyond the outward form and accusations, who had his head together. May peace be with you and myself. As we remember when we get angry and feel abused and unfairly treated, and who hasn't, that's not our true self. That's our ego. That's our body identification. But in breathing in and realizing again that we're spirit, and that is immortal, unchangeable, indestructible, unburnable, undrownable, that indeed is who we are, and therein is our peace. God bless you, and namaste.